The pilot had flown through storms that cracked the sky open, across combat zones where tracer rounds flashed beneath his wings, but nothing prepared him for the terror that unfolded that morning. 30 minutes into the flight, when the hum of the engines lulled passengers into false security, chaos erupted. A group of men charged down the aisle, masks covering their faces, guns raised, voices barking orders in harsh tones. Panic surged through the cabin like electricity. People screamed, children wailed, passengers ducked low, clutching each other as the hijackers seized control. The pilot, standing near the cockpit door, froze at the sight, his instincts screaming to act, yet knowing any move could trigger a bloodbath. His eyes scanned the crowd, catching fragments of fear, tear-streaked cheeks, trembling hands, lips silently mouthing prayers. But then he noticed her. Amid the hysteria, one woman sat upright, composed, her eyes steady, her hands calmly folded in her lap. She wasn't whispering prayers, wasn't sobbing like the rest. She was still calculating. And in that stillness, the pilot sensed something chilling. She wasn't just enduring this nightmare. She was preparing for something that none of them could yet imagine. The hijackers wasted no time establishing dominance. They shoved passengers to the floor, forced crew members to kneel, and demanded the flight change course. The pilot knew that resistance would mean slaughter, yet giving in would only delay the inevitable. Every word from their leader dripped with menace, threats punctuated by the barrel of an assault rifle. Fear suffocated the cabin, choking the air until it was heavy with despair. Still, the woman did not break. A gun was shoved inches from her face, but she didn't flinch. When one of the hijackers sneered, asking if she was afraid, she simply shook her head, her silence sharper than any insult. It unsettled them. Even the armed men, hardened by hate and ideology, looked rattled by her defiance. Passengers whispered, their voices trembling, some calling her brave, others insane. But whatever she was, she had caught the hijackers' attention, and their leader's eyes lingered on her longer than on anyone else. The pilot felt unease curl inside him. This woman wasn't like the others. She was either going to doom them all or save them. The hours dragged by with merciless weight. The cabin became a coffin filled with gasps, whimpers, and the heavy stench of sweat and terror. Mothers tried to shield their children's eyes. Businessmen cowered, and elderly passengers sobbed into trembling hands. Every sound seemed to provoke the hijackers, who barked orders and waved their weapons with volatile impatience. And yet, in the middle of this nightmare, the woman's presence carved through the fear like a blade. Her composure was impossible to ignore. She didn't resist, didn't antagonize, but her very calmness seemed to unsettle the men who fed off panic. They hovered around her as if waiting for her to break, but she refused. At one point, a hijacker accused her of mocking them with her silence. He struck her across the face, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Gasps rippled through the cabin, but still she did not cry. She simply looked back at him, blood trickling from her lip, her eyes defiant and cold. The pilot's heart pounded as he watched. He didn't understand her strength, but he knew it was dangerous. For her, and for everyone trapped in that steel prison of sky. When the plane finally descended onto an abandoned airstrip, the tension sharpened into something unbearable. The hijackers herded the passengers off the aircraft, lining them against the fading horizon as dusk swallowed the sky. Their leader shouted demands into a radio, voice laced with venom, weapons, money, safe passage, or death for every hostage. The ground was hard beneath the passengers' knees as they were forced down, their lives balanced on the trigger fingers of desperate men. The pilot stood at the front, his crew beside him, sweat dripping down his neck as he waited for the execution order. And yet as they knelt under the shadow of rifles, he saw her again. The woman moved with a strange calm, standing straighter than the rest, her eyes lifted as if she were unafraid of what came next. When a hijacker shoved her down, she did not resist, only tilted her head toward the sky, whispering words no one else could hear. The pilot felt something cold slither through him. Her silence wasn't resignation, it was resolve. He could sense it, though he couldn't yet understand. The breaking point came when a young hostage was dragged forward, his cries splitting the night as the hijackers prepared to execute him. That was when she moved. Rising to her knees, her voice cut through the tension like a razor. She spoke their language, words none of the other passengers understood, but that stopped the armed men in their tracks. The leader turned to her, suspicion narrowing his eyes. She didn't cower. She spoke louder, sharper, each syllable striking like a whip. The young hostage was shoved back into line, spared for the moment. Murmurs rippled through the prisoners, confusion mixing with fragile hope. The pilot's chest tightened as he realized what was happening. This woman was negotiating. Not for herself, but for all of them. Her calm had not been passivity. It had been strategy, waiting for the right moment to wield her voice like a weapon. And it was working. He could see it in the hesitation of their captors, in the way their leader's jaw clenched with unease. She was shaking the foundation of their control. The night grew long, broken by scattered gunfire and shouted arguments among the terrorists. Hunger gnawed at the passengers, thirst burned their throats, but the woman never wavered. She stayed locked in conversation with the leader, her voice steady, her body language firm. At times, the hijackers shouted at her, pointing rifles at her chest, but she never faltered. Even without understanding her words, the other hostages clung to her presence like a lifeline. The pilot saw it clearly. Her calmness was infecting them. Where there had been only sobbing and despair, now there was the faint flicker of courage. Even the terrorists were cracking. They snapped at one another, their unity crumbling as they argued over her influence. She had become a force they couldn't control, and yet they couldn't silence her either. The pilot felt both awe and dread. Whoever this woman was, she had taken command of the battlefield without ever lifting a weapon. But her defiance drew blood. By dawn, one of the younger terrorists, raw with nerves and rage, snapped. He accused her of betraying their mission, screamed that she was poisoning their minds. He raised his gun, finger trembling on the trigger. Passengers shrieked, some turning their faces away, unable to watch. The pilot surged forward instinctively, but before he could move, her voice rose again. It wasn't pleading, it was commanding. Her tone cracked the air, sharp and fierce. The young man froze, tears brimming in his eyes, his weapon shaking violently before he lowered it. He was struck hard across the face by his leader, punished for weakness, but the gunshot never came. She had saved herself, and in doing so had saved them all once more. The pilot realized something terrifying. She now had sway over them. Not submission, but influence. She had reached inside their fanaticism and left a seed of doubt. It was power more dangerous than any bullet. The siege stretched into its third day, each hour carving deeper wounds of exhaustion into the passengers. And yet hope clung to them through her. Rumors spread in hushed whispers. Some swore she was trained, an undercover intelligence agent planted among civilians. Others claimed she was a survivor of wars, carrying scars unseen. A few whispered she was something otherworldly, a guardian sent to protect them. No one knew her truth, but all of them clung to her presence. And then when the final stand came, she showed them what she was made of. The government refused the hijackers' impossible demands, warning of a military raid. Cornered, desperate, the terrorists prepared to kill. Guns were raised, fingers curled around triggers. The end seemed certain. But before death rained down, she rose. Her voice tore through the night like thunder, words fierce, relentless, merciless in their precision. The leader's resolve cracked. His weapon slipped, and one by one the others followed. They surrendered. The impossible had happened. Soldiers stormed the airfield, chaos exploding in flashes of light and shouted orders. Terrorists were dragged away, hostages pulled into safety. Yet through the frenzy, the pilot searched for her. He scanned the crowd, called out, but she was gone, vanished. Medics tended to the wounded, journalists swarmed, survivors clung to their families, but she had disappeared as if she'd never existed. No name, no trace. Some passengers gave conflicting descriptions of her hair, her eyes, even her accent. It was as though she had been a mirage conjured by their desperation. But the pilot knew. He had seen her bleed, had watched her stand between life and death, had felt the weight of her defiance shatter men with guns. She was real. And she had saved them, yet she had chosen to vanish back into the shadows, leaving only silence in her place. Her story spread in whispers, warped by rumor and myth. Some insisted she had been a spy, others claimed she was a local woman who grew up under the shadow of war. A few believed she wasn't human at all. But to the pilot, the truth was simpler and far more haunting. She was a reminder that in the darkest moments, when terror grips like chains and death hovers inches away, sometimes it is not weapons or armies that change fate. Sometimes it is the unbreakable will of one soul who refuses to bend. He carried her memory for the rest of his life, a scar etched deeper than any wound, a question that would never find an answer. Who was she? And why had she chosen them? The world would never know. But in the quiet hours of night, when the silence pressed heavy, the pilot swore he could still hear her voice, steady, unshaken, and forever unforgettable. Thank you for watching this story on Armed Forces Stories. If this tale moved you, if it made you feel the weight of courage in the face of darkness, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Armed Forces Stories for more powerful accounts of survival and strength.